Hello, everyone. Can everybody hear me? Are we live? So I think we're live. If you can give me the thumbs up or a comment that you can hear me, that would be great. Excuse me, I have a cold today and I'm struggling big time. So sorry about that. Right, let's get started, shall we? So today we're going to be talking about career obstacles and how to overcome career blockers. So, hello and welcome to everybody joining me today. I apologize in advance. I've got a cold. I've got a terrible cold these couple of days. We're streaming on multiple platforms, so please do give me the thumbs up if you can hear me and see me, of course. And as always, please feel free to leave any questions or comments below. I would like this session to be as interactive as possible and to answer your questions and comments throughout the session live. So that makes it more fun. So please, any comments, any suggestions, any questions, please put them in the comment section. I'm getting a few calls now, which is interesting. So if the audio and video are coming through to you, okay, please comment or give me the thumbs up. And we will give it a few seconds for more people to join us. I'll just do a quick, let's say, test of the audio, just really quickly. That's cool. Everything works. So, as always, welcome to my live today. Today we're going to be talking about career blockers and a few soft skills that a lot of engineers struggle with, in my experience and from what I've witnessed so far. So, we're going to talk about these blockers or obstacles and how to deal with them. And for those of you who do not know me or joining me for the first time, my name is Mohammed Yunus, and I work as a director of design and engineering for Aureus Energy. We specialize in substations and power grid connections and overhead line projects, amongst other energy construction projects. I've spent so far 17 years in this field, and I have been really lucky to work on some of the big projects, and I find it really interesting and an intriguing field, and something that I'm really enthusiastic about. And as always, I want to share the knowledge, I want to learn from others, and I want to have interesting conversations and hopefully learn something new every day and every time we're doing this. I really think and encourage more people to do this, and more people should be doing this. because we need to spread the knowledge and learn from each other. And some people ask me, why are you doing this? I want to connect with engineers, and it's my biggest source of professional growth at the moment, is connecting with interesting engineers working on interesting projects, and to learn from what is happening out there and how we are all developing as an industry. That's very important for me. But also I want to push myself and learn from others and learn from their questions and from their different perspectives. And of course, public speaking is a skill that I enjoy and that I want to grow and perfect, and it needs regular practicing. And this is why I am kind of encouraging myself and keeping it a habit to go live on LinkedIn and try and learn more and more and share more and more. So today we're going to be talking about career obstacles and how to deal with them. Now, I want you to comment in the comment section. Give me a comment if you have an obstacle in mind. Is there something in particular that you feel you're struggling with when it comes to moving or advancing professionally and within your career? So by all means, if you wouldn't mind, I've just forgotten to put on the phone here, which is something I am trying to get right while, oh man, yeah, I think that's gonna be good enough. Yeah, fine. So by the way, the full recording of this video will be on Substack. This is where I share all the articles, I share everything I write, and some resources and some templates and other tools that I've created and share with anybody and everybody for free. So Substack is a place that I encourage people to check out and learn more on. And this is a place where you could connect with a lot of writers, with a lot of people who are sharing information and writing about interesting stuff. It's a very interesting place. And today, actually, I'm celebrating a milestone of reaching 500 subscribers over there. So thank you so much for everybody's support and for those giving me their time and their attention. It really means a lot. And as always, today we're going to be discussing little things and things that are easy to learn and apply, but usually or hopefully making a big difference. And if you get to know these things, then you can focus on very small actions that take you closer to your goals. We will discuss career obstacles. We will discuss what blocks our careers as engineers and how to deal with these blockers, how to deal with these obstacles, how to navigate through them and around them and work, hopefully, to get more and more opportunities and get more and more success in your career as engineers. And we'll try to cover a lot of useful aspects, but as always, we try to focus on specific areas to learn from and keep it very manageable and small in terms of actions. So the first area we're going to be discussing today is going to be unhelpful emotions. And I certainly struggled with this area a lot in the past. And it's only when I really learned how to control and regulate my emotions that it made a big difference, in my opinion, to how I approach work and how I have progressed over the years and most recently. How they block our careers and without us knowing is a big, also important topic to think about and talk about, but also how to deal with them. So that's going to be our first area. The second area is going to be dealing with changes. And again, this is an interesting subject or topic. I feel a lot of people are missing on big opportunities because of their shying away from changes, or because of people missing on better opportunities because of avoiding change, trying to quit change. So it's one of the biggest opportunity creators, especially for engineers in big organizations, and it unlocks a lot of progress. So change is not the enemy, unlike what most people feel or think. And it's human nature to resist and be weary of change, of course. And the third area would be how our lack of resilience and patience can harm our careers, and why is it important to grow that resilience, to grow that patience, and to foster persistence as well. The fourth element I would like to talk to you about today is stagnation, and how people find themselves, or engineers in particular, find themselves not progressing enough and not developing enough, and how does it harm us in terms of our progress and stopping and blocking our career progress, and how do we deal with it. And then the last point for today is going to be mentorship. So, how do people not know about this trick is beyond me, but mentorship is a huge unlocker for a lot of progress and a lot of learning and a lot of accelerated development and progression as well in your career. So, how does it affect our careers? We're going to explore that today, and how can we become better at becoming mentees, or people to be mentored, but also where to find mentors and how can we get the most out of that professional relationship. Now, we're going to explore a lot of these aspects, or within, the aspects within these few areas today. We're going to try and give examples, of course, and always ask me questions if something's not clear, or if you need me to go through something again and again. I will give practical exercises and advice on how to identify, whether we suffer from that blocker or struggle with it, and how do we deal with it, and what would be the best course of action to progress and push forward as engineers. Now, the first area we said was unhelpful emotions, and this is very, very tricky and important, because feeling emotions is very normal. It's natural. It's very human to have emotions, and sometimes the misconception is that successful people have some kind of emotional detachment, and that might be true. But I would prefer to think of it in a different way. I think the people who are more successful know how to manage their emotions. So the misconception, or the biggest misconception we want to get out of the way today, is you don't need to feel anything at work. That's not right. Feeling is human. It's a sign that you are, alive, and it's also a sign that you care, because feelings are very natural for humans. And having emotions is not a bad thing. On the contrary, having emotions, as we said, really means that you care, you take pride in your work, you care about your work, your results, your career, your livelihood as an engineer, of course, and as somebody who's providing for their family. So having emotions is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. And we need those emotions and we need those feelings as humans to function. And they are usually the first line of reaction to compel us into taking responses and taking responsive actions in order to correct something, or in order to avoid the danger. So they are very primitive mechanisms in our brains. So the good thing is, or the good thing about having emotions, is that hopefully they can become positive. They can be turned into something that takes us forward and useful, not harmful, and encourages us to take actions that are useful and not harmful. Now, the first emotion people struggle with is usually, I don't want to say depression as a technical term, but sadness as well. And it can come from feeling disappointed. Whether it's a disappointment in one's development throughout their career, or in a certain stage of their career, whether they're feeling stagnation, or having also over expectations in your career. So when you are over expecting, your happiness levels will definitely drop and be difficult to manage. Now, another very unhelpful and yet very common feeling or emotion is frustration and anger. And again, it can stem from finding things aren't going your way, and it's a primitive, again, reaction. But especially when you feel maybe that others are letting you down in the workplace, or things like that. So these are all emotions that are normal and we can experience as humans, but it can also stem from chaos, or having to deal with too much change. And that's something that can be common. So, what causes these unhelpful emotions? As we said, they are a natural response, a human response, but usually they're really primitive underlying psychological mechanisms that trigger certain feelings and want to drive responses or reactions. So they're really based on, I think originally, I believe, from what I've read and learned, is that they are based on basic survival needs. So things like feeling threatened or feeling fear or anxiety when we perceive something is potentially going to harm us in our job or in our career or in our position within an organization. So these are all triggers and things that we have to look out for. And of course, there is the attachment or, again, anxiety around loss, losing something. When we perceive that we are going to be losing a benefit or losing a certain status or possession or advantage within our position as professionals. So, again, these can be one of the triggers, mostly, I think, for engineers, because we want to be in control. The perceived feeling or the feeling of losing control can be very daunting and it can be very triggering. Again, unmet expectations, on the other hand, can be very, very frustrating. So these are all negative feelings and or triggers for those negative feelings. But it's also normal to look around us and try to hold comparisons, try to measure our careers and our progress to others, try to measure our status. There's nothing wrong with wanting more. And I believe that, again, comparisons are normal, but it's how we respond and how we utilize these or how we act upon these emotions that can be problematic. If you have any questions or if you feel you're following so far, give me a comment, please. Now, we said while these emotions can be very normal, they can be very natural, we all feel them from time to time, they can be destructive if unmanaged. So these feelings are very normal, but they can be destructive if unmanaged and not dealt with in the correct way. So we have to, first of all, identify or acknowledge these feelings, but understand how they can be problematic. The first problem out of these unhelpful emotions that blocks our careers or can cause us a bit of harm in progression in our careers is bad decision making. Of course, spiraling into action or jumping into action based on an uncontrolled, usually negative emotion. It mainly affects our decision making. So, this is the first career blocker that we can really feel from having uncontrolled or negative emotions, is that we feel angry because something is not going our way, and we rush based on that anger into unhelpful action. Regardless what that action is, it's usually one of a destructive nature. We might not necessarily view it that way when we're taking those actions, but at the same time, they might cause us harm in our careers. So these are usually the decisions that we take around our careers and our jobs that might be rushed or without careful thought or based on, again, unhelpful emotions. Another thing is communication breakdown, and this is where people can sulk or withdraw themselves from the actual engagement. And this is very harmful as well because it leaves a lot on the table. There is a lot of usually opportunity in becoming in staying engaged, in staying involved in doing the work. And usually this is at the detriment of the work or the engineer's work. So uh, it will harm their work. It can damage their personal brand or reputation. So again, sulking and communication breakdown is not a good thing, um, or it's a problematic outcome of unhelpful emotions. Now, another problematic outcome is collaboration suffering, and this is a killer for engineering work, because usually engineering work is based around collaborations across multiple disciplines, across different teams, across different types of elements of the work. And relationships deteriorate when collaboration and trust struggle based on those emotions. And in many cases, relationships running out of trust will, harm the actual organization, because trust runs relationships or professional relationships, and professional relationships run on trust in an organization are really vehicles for productivity and more work being done and actually getting things moving and unblocked. Um, I'm sorry again. I've got a cold, so my voice is not coming through very clearly. But let me tell you a story or two about how engineers, or how I've seen engineers having uncontrolled emotions resulting in affecting their careers and growth. And I have to be careful, of course, because I'm going to be, mentioning things that could be um, sensitive. I'll try not to, but in any case, these are things that I've actually witnessed in real life. So I've seen so many people, engineers, and I've seen so many engineers make not necessarily the best decisions in jumping ship too soon, or for reasons frankly that are common to the industry. So people would basically think that they're running away or escaping something that they don't necessarily like or feel comfortable with, which is fair enough. But that could be just a perception, and that thing could be a common pressure found in that industry. So changing organizations within the same industry wouldn't necessarily be the solution, and that is again an action that people could have avoided, or a mistake that people could have avoided if they haven't acted upon their initial emotion. If they have taken the time and studied the decision and thought about it carefully, they could have either reached a solution, or they could have really made a better move, if that makes sense. Because it's important to acknowledge what works for you and what doesn't as a person, and what suits you as a person and what doesn't. There's nothing wrong with that at all. So by feeling frustrated and letting the frustration urge you into, or urge them into action, they have actually taken actions, abandoning, or let's say quitting those roles to another, thinking that they will not find those other compelling, or that those same compelling reasons in that new situation. So it's the grass is always greener on the other side kind of situation, of course. But that problem can be, also not naturally a problem in itself. On the contrary, it can be an opportunity to grow um, if dealt with in, rather than avoided, or if someone could get more help or more guidance on how to deal with a certain situation, rather than giving up or giving in on the situation and trying something different. So I would really argue that it is the expectations of the individual that are sometimes unrealistic. And this is something, look, I had to deal with myself. And it is always more about the way we choose to respond to those emotions. So someone might say, well, okay, we know the negative emotions, we know the unhelpful emotions. We all go through them from time to time. So what is the catch? Why is there a benefit of managing them? Well, actually, first of all, is better decisions. And again, focusing on positive actions. On the long term, these can make miracles for your career because positive actions, when they are incremental, when they are on top of each other, they can really catapult you into more and quick success and progression. So it's just a matter of the right, consistent steps in the right direction that are taken consistently that drive results better than anything else. And of course, you'd enjoy better working relationships, better results, and better outcomes from those working and healthy professional relationships. Because ones that acknowledge emotions, but not act on them in a negative way and not let the emotions overrule everything, will really yield more um, successful outcomes. And you'll find success more often and you'll be able to accomplish more because you're able to manage your emotions and your expectations and focus on what you can control and what you could do positively to move you forward. So these are things that you can control and will make the difference. And of course, for me, the biggest or one of the biggest reasons for learning more about myself, learning more about how I control unhelpful emotions and how to manage them and how to regulate them, for me is the best outcome out of this is having more fun, being more happy, being more content, and being more satisfied with what I do. And when you are realistic with your expectations, you will find that you're enjoying more, you're having more fun. You are not being overwhelmed by the let's say negative connotations that come along with unmet expectations. So your career will also be healthier for you as a person and as an engineer, but also you are enjoying a kind of longevity when you are able to regulate your emotions in your career. And also very, 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 very important is a lot of people ask, why aren't we being lined up for opportunities or growth, etc. Well, mostly if you show that kind of mature emotional regulation, then you're really perceived as leadership material, and you will be known as the person who's always positive, who's always reasonable, reliable, trustworthy, and more um, pressure prone, if that makes sense. So, in my opinion, when you are perceived as reliable, when you are perceived as a good team member or a team player who most people would agree on being a trustworthy partner in work, then, and you're more pressure prone, then you're definitely leadership material and a lot of leadership opportunities will come your way. So, how do you recognize unhelpful emotions, and how do you do that? Well, first of all, you know yourself better than anyone else, and if you don't, then you should start investing time, money, effort into learning and educating yourself on learning more about your well-being, on learning more about your um, style as an individual, your different preferences as a personality, and also discover more on your well-being and mental health. So I certainly found that unhelpful emotions will have signs. So the signs to recognize them and look out for them are really usually physical and bodily signs, and of course the feelings of frustration or being overwhelmed, fatigue. People say racing heart, tension, but these are all, of course, very common signs. Stomach knots, headaches, loss of being able to focus for longer. So these are all, I think, signs that you could look out for. And excuse me, I'm just struggling with the cold. So things are very, very challenging with this cold. And withdrawal or unwillingness to engage is also another sign. So we said that the more you are engaged, the more you are involved, the better it is for you in your career. That's just very, very common and very true. Sulking and changing in behavior towards getting involved more is really not a good sign. And it might feel that it might mean that you are struggling with unhelpful emotions and how to manage them. So, extreme reactions can also be a sign. Some people from time to time can blow things out of proportion or um, react in a very, let's say, overwhelmed and extreme way, but also being stuck in negative thought loops and repeating negative notions and really being stuck in that negativity, if you like. And how to deal with unhelpful emotions, that's the takeaway from this segment is first of all, you need to recognize that they are normal, they are happening. You just don't let them take over, and that takes some training. And you have to repeat to yourself, this is normal, this is natural, it's being human. But also important to defer any actions or any responses or conclusions on these thoughts until you really gather the facts and really process the emotion and let it take its course. Emotions, take time, and coping mechanisms are also very, very useful. I find breathing exercises very useful and have found them in the past. Mindfulness, but of course, my very favorite is writing down my thoughts and writing down my unhelpful thoughts and unhelpful emotions. So I do that all the time, and I've got diaries for that. Um, but another thing that I have read about in the past, and there's a couple of good, interesting books around this which are very helpful that I will link. I think I've written about them an article on my LinkedIn as well, so you'll find it somewhere. I'll try to link back to it. But cognitive reframing, and this is where shifting perspective is really helpful. So you need to challenge any interpretation of a certain situation that are or maybe negative, and question whether they are accurate, whether they are based on facts, or whether they are just merely feelings that you are having in response to a situation that didn't go your way or something that you don't really feel um, comfortable with or happy with, let's say. So is it based on a fact or is it based on an intuition and just a gut feeling? And which could be in many cases an unhelpful emotion. So perspective shifting, we talked about that, but also see the opportunity in the challenge, and focus on the solutions rather than the obstacles or the problems. And one thing that also helped me in the past in how to deal with unhelpful emotions is just boundaries and separation. So I always think of the negative emotion, of course, and I feel it, but I now try to detach the negative emotion from the situation and what could be actually be done or an action that could be taken by me to move forward. And I avoid labeling things. Those absolute labels can sometimes be very, very unhelpful. And instead, I will focus on the root cause and try to find what I could do to move forward. So that was the first segment, which was around unhelpful emotions. How are we doing on time? We're 40 minutes, I think, almost in. So hopefully, I'll try to go quickly over the next couple of um, segments. Do you have any questions so far? Are there a lot of people watching this, or who's following me so far? Can't see in the chat. Right. I've got a coaching program launching soon. I've had many requests and people asking me to create a program that they could um, follow and something they could learn from. So if you think that's going to be useful, let me know and I will send you the details soon. Right. So the next element is around adaptiveness and how we respond to change. And, for us, change, we need to first define change. What is change? Well, it's alteration in any ways in the organization or in the environment around us. And usually, adaptiveness is the personal or the person's ability to adjust effectively and swiftly to any change. So how they perceive change is usually as an opportunity for growth. How they process change is usually detailed and thorough. It's not initial response based, or it's not very, very responsive and um, in a way that is uh, uh, erratic, but it usually is thorough and based on facts and based on clarifying, but also how they choose to react. And that's usually positively and in taking useful actions. And change is not negative all the time, or is usually, actually, in my experience, not negative at all. It's very common and it changes, it recurs in different forms. And it is usually driven by internal or external factors. So, for example, it could be a change in personnel and responsible in leadership positions. It could be also a change in ways of working and in processes of doing things. It could be around the perception of risk in the organization and how the organization is now choosing to react or drive the work and mitigations going forward when it comes in response to these risks. But also a lot of it is around profitability, around productivity, around business development and new areas of business. So these are all things that could be drivers for change. And this is why change is very, very common, especially in a lot of the modern day corporates and organizations and companies. And there could be some external factors as well, driving change. And these could be because of market conditions, because of competitiveness, because of how the competition is developing or also shifting and changing. And it could be also because of regulations and changes in regulations and governance around the market or the industry which the company operates in. Change can take, or change in organizations can take many forms. It can be in organizational structure, in roles, in layers. So it can be structural and reorganizational, but it can also come with merging and acquisitions. It can come in separation and divestment. It can come also with changes in leadership positions or leadership personnel. So there's a lot of forms of change and how it reflects onto your situation as an engineer in the organization. So some forms of other forms of change can be around operational changes in the process, in ways of working, on how delivery is being planned for, how it is executed, and of course, change in business approach to different aspects of the operation. Just give me a second, sorry. You could tell how important these lives are for me because I'm just struggling with cold, and I still insisted to go live because I think it's important that I keep the habit and I don't uh, skip a day. I'm going on holiday soon anyway, so I'm gonna be out of LinkedIn. I'm gonna probably put my LinkedIn profile on pause for a month to disconnect and just take my time with the family and doing other stuff. Anyway, so back to changes in organizations. And again, it could be changes in ways of working, it could be how delivery is approached, and of course, different aspects of the operation or the operations of the company. And a lot of also more common changes come in the strategy, in the business model, and how the business adjusts to certain external and internal factors, as we said. But this is the most shocking because it can upset situations um, of a lot of people who aren't in line with this new strategy. So that could be also a big challenge. Now, excuse me, with any change, there is always a blur in the future and a level of uncertainty. And these are the challenges with experiencing change as an engineer. It could introduce, a certain unclarity on career progression, on future opportunities, on my status quo as an engineer. It can also introduce a degree of uncertainty about one's future. That's very normal, of course. So roles, can change and shift, causing some ambiguities, but they could also introduce conflicts in the organization when someone's understanding is no longer relevant of what they're supposed to be doing or what they're supposed to not be doing. So these are all conflicts that could be or could arise because of change or because of poorly managed change, if you like. Um, as people, we might feel anxiety over we're still relevant or whether our skills are still desired as engineers, or is my position safe as an engineer? Is my job safe as an engineer? So these are all, is my job secure? Is my experience still valid and relevant and desired, as we said? So these are all, challenges with experiencing changes. And they are things that are very, very common. Excuse me again. I will just be on mute for a second. Right. So in some cases, I've seen changes occur so often that it causes fatigue in the system, and engineers within the business and even like established leaders, we can all feel from time to time that that change is overwhelming or it's too much for us. And this is why it's very important to manage that change, not only as organizations but on the individual level. We all have this kind of responsibility or that level of responsibility. And the most common story I see, and it's very, very common, is the engineers experiencing the beginning of a change and then deciding to take action based on that initial perception or feeling. So they decide to leave or force quit before they even realize what this change might entail, what it means, what it could bring. And usually it could bring a lot of good opportunities. So I saw how change can bring massive opportunities for some engineers. And personally, I felt that some of the or in the past, a couple of the changes that happened in organizations where I worked really yielded better opportunities for me and the team eventually. So all of a sudden, there are usually shifts and moves and more leadership opportunities becoming available for people who persist through that change in the organization. And usually that is or pays dividends for the highly adaptive individual. So adaptiveness is very, very important. But again, as we said, um, usually, and in my experience with change, I've seen enhanced or better career opportunities. I've seen change usually coming up and opening more opportunities. So changed really isn't necessarily negative at all. And on the contrary, most of the changes I've seen have driven positive outcomes for myself and for the team I've worked with and for people I've witnessed in organizations. And even the people I speak to and even the people I get mentored by, they all share the same. They tell me that change was usually in many of the stories, the biggest, best thing that happened to them. Other benefits of change can be really indirect, but persisting through that change and living through that change and choosing to stay over. Um, really changing in response to that change, expands the skill sets and develops engineers more and more, because it puts us through different organizational challenges and situations. And surviving those challenges usually means a big deal of interesting experience and new, unprecedented experience that we get exposure to. So, this type of experience isn't usually available in other conditions. And I feel that change comes with that very unique and tailored custom experience. And it really adds um, to our capabilities, our experience, our skill set as engineers, because it is usually transformational. It does build stronger characters. It does grow resilience. It does have a lot of positive impacts on self confidence, also a more adaptive and growing mindset. So these are all things that are really fostered and nurtured through change. And the more you experience change and respond positively, the more you grow as a person and become capable of more or doing more in different and often more challenging situations. So that's very, very useful. And again, it provides that kind of training situation that is usually not available elsewhere. In very, very stable situations, limited, predicted, or predictive, or predictable situations, they're not as volatile as changes. They don't show you the extent of your character, they don't show you the extent of your capabilities, unlike changing and evolving situations. So, how do we deal with change? And the best way to deal with change is, first of all, acknowledge and change the way we, oh, excuse the pun, but change the way we think about change as normal. It's really interesting. We all feel resistance to change, but change is the only constant. It happens all the time. And if it wasn't for change, I think our lives would have been monotonous and kind of really boring. So, control and regulate our emotions, acknowledge that change is normal, but control and regulate our emotions toward that change as well. Not rush into actions, focus on what we can do or control in order to adapt positively to that change, and try to find the opportunity without jumping into quick conclusions. Ask questions, um, gather facts, and try to understand more on why and how this change is coming about. Why is it implemented? What will actually change for you? Because most of the time, our perceptions are quite exaggerated. Normally, again, because we're humans and we tend to jump into that fight, flight, fright responses. So, how can you adapt? What can you do, and where can you find the opportunity in the change, and what could you do to maximize that opportunity or your opportunity in the change? And be always involved in the communication. So don't sulk. Stay in communication. Be up to date on how the change is progressing through the organization. If it affects you directly, of course, especially if it does affect you directly. But always plan for opportunities and new strategies in the business. Understand the new strategy. Try to align yourself and focus on what you can control and taking the positive actions. There is a very good book on change called Who's Moved My Cheese? And again, I've written an article about it. So I will dig out the link and share it with you in the comments. The third area that I want to be talking about today is resilience. And there is a differentiation between resilience, patience, and persistence. Three of them are very important and related traits, but resilience is really about recovering quickly and swiftly and bouncing back, usually stronger or better from setbacks or falls or failures, whatever you want to call them. And persistence, on the other hand, is that ability of carrying on and through with a preset course of actions, and avoiding too much self-inflicted chopping and changing. This is, again, it takes a lot of um, agency and dedication to go through these difficulties and setbacks and challenges. And patience, of course, is remaining calmer and allowing things more time, allowing things, even to be delayed, dare I say it, if you feel they're not happening quick enough for you. And these are really around, or patience is really around managing our time expectations. When it comes to progression, growth, trying something different, etc., etc. And I've really struggled with patience. I still do, but I'm usually impatient and I'm usually 100 miles an hour. But this is something that I had to learn how to develop and control. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I apologize again. So, how common is this? It's really around human psychology, and we are really um, less resilient as people in general, as a human race today, more than ever, I think, and especially with the ever so shortening attention spans and becoming bored far more easily and wanting more. So these are all common trends in modern day human psychology that really drive our lack of resilience, the lack of patience, or being impatient and being not really persistent enough. But as engineers, we're also very lucky to be in an open market where the grass is always greener on the other side, but also it's very, very easy for us to get more and better opportunities. The world is connected, everybody's online, recruiters are working all the time online to get more and more, you know, um, people moving across organizations. But as I said, we're lucky. We're enjoying a shortage in skilled and qualified engineers, which means that engineers today are contacted all the time by recruiters trying to get them over to join their organizations and into different roles. But also, it's our easy lives, and the work challenges are usually very important for development. So this is why this is a problem. The lack of resilience is a problem. Lack of patience, lack of persistence is a problem, because usually our development will go through an uncomfortable situation at work, or let's say something that is a bit of a challenge at work. And this could seem very difficult and hard for us. So we're not really, um, especially those like me, and us, we're privileged, and we don't really have to endure a difficult, or hardship to not change. So this is why people easily change and just jump ship. And as I said, and I'm not criticizing anybody, and fair enough to anyone, fair play. But at the same time, the question becomes, why do I need to experience any hardship when I could just earn more somewhere, where I could just move on to a bigger title or bigger role somewhere? And we all go through this. It's just normal. But this is one of the things that perhaps contributes to us as engineers not developing enough. So we don't give it enough time to develop, and usually contributing to us not developing in the right way as well, not maturing. So development needs time, it needs a bit of a challenge, it needs some kind of challenging situations and circumstances. And usually we need the time for us to persist and endure and experience towards the end, usually, of a job or a project, how the impact of our earlier work was. And this is something that is very interesting. And I write about this, and I get sometimes a bit of negativity online, but that's okay. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But I feel that if you're a design engineer, for instance, and you're working on a certain type of project, you need to be aware of the time that you need in order for that project to get to site and reflect back to you with feedback on your work. Otherwise, you're not developing as much. You're not, surely, you're not maturing and you're not developing your skill set as an engineer. So, this results in, I would say, shallow skill development and of course inflated capabilities. And when people move around a lot, a year here, a year there, nothing wrong with that for some. I'm not criticizing anybody, but mostly it will result in jumping around without spending enough time to mature the engineer's capabilities. So this means their problem solving, their work achieving criteria, and their ability to contribute at a higher standard is really not there and is usually inflated. So, again, these are things that we need to look out for as engineers in order to develop and in order to grow our careers in the best way possible. But also, problems from being impatient is more errors, more mistakes, more negative impacts, more bad decisions. These are all impacts and things that could happen when we lack resilience. But on the other hand, engineers who persist enough through challenging projects and get the job done, be it in an imperfect scenario or way, 9 times out of 10, and I've seen this, and in my experience, they get the best rewards within the organization. If not, if it's a faulty organization and it happens, then they will definitely be able to articulate and exhibit further capabilities than anyone else in interviews or in future opportunities. So nothing is lost, in my opinion, and that experience becomes perceived as a very, very high level of contribution. So the benefits in a summary is that with persistence you achieve more and more, you get more done, and especially those long-term goals in your career. And with patience you don't really miss out on those opportunities that are just around the corner. And I've struggled with this. Earlier in my career, I was always impatient. I was always in a hurry. I still am. I'm still in a hurry, I feel. But I learned to deal with it and to suppress that um, unhelpful feeling of being in a hurry all the time. So we always tend to feel progression is not happening fast enough. And sometimes it's incremental, and sometimes it can happen all at once. And sometimes it can come in later years in our careers. I remember a story of mine. This really happened to me, and I was a young engineer one day, and I've asked someone I looked up to, why am I not getting opportunities? And he said, "How many years of experience do you have?" And I said, 4 or 5. And he immediately told me, the best opportunities will come to you at least with 10 years, 12 years of experience, maybe 8 years of experience if you're really lucky. But, the best opportunities are yet to come, usually, the way we think about it. We always tend to be in a hurry, we always tend to be impatient, but the best opportunities are yet to come. And they usually come to us when we have matured and really gathered useful and positive experience. So, with resilience, of course, you can break through a lot of changes and adversity and still thrive. And because with being resilient, you focus on what you can control, you focus on the positive forward actions, you focus on the important things, you really neglect the distractions and the notions coming from feelings, not necessarily facts. So, you're not really distracted by setbacks or challenges when you are resilient. And this is something that we need to grow and we need to learn in ourselves. So we need to grow in ourselves and we need to learn about. So how to recognize if we have a problem with the lack of resilience or lack of patience or lack of persistence is that number one, if we found ourselves jumping ship too often and too soon, and another one is we could be struggling with resilience, patience, or persistence if we are feeling overly frustrated most of the time, if we also feel that we're repeating or spewing negativity, that also is a sign that, we're not really handling resilience or handling our careers resiliently. And of course, the last one is if you find yourself rushing into actions and only to find yourself making mistakes that could have been avoided if you would have allowed yourself more time and more thoughts on the situation. So I did this a lot. I still do it to an extent, trying to learn from it. But these are important things that I need to remind myself and remind others that I work with and um, mentor in general. So, how do we become more resilient? Well, first of all, it's about self discovery, it's about knowing yourself. Again, it's important to learn how to know yourself, how to know what motivates you, what keeps you going. So, it's more training, it's more emotional awareness, it's more positive reinforcement, it's more mindfulness that has helped me a lot. And of course, you can become also more patient and more resilient and persistent by managing your expectations, questioning, not questioning, but being realistic, giving again your circumstance and giving your current situation and circumstances a chance, enough time to reflect positively, and knowing, of course, what is enough time. So this depends on your nature of a job, on your industry, on the nature of the organizations, on the market, on the culture, on the country, on many factors. So knowing what is enough time. What is enough time for a junior software engineer is different to enough time for a junior electrical engineer in the substations construction industry. So these are really factors that you need to be aware of and learn about. So for me, it's about having a reliable plan, but also achievable and measurable objectives, realistic expectations as an engineer progressing in their career, but also consulting with those whom I look up to and those whom I find as good role models. So consulting with mentors, of course. How are we doing on time? Are there any questions? Let me go through. Okay, no questions so far. That's good. Is anybody following me, or have I sent people to sleep again? Give me the thumbs up if you're following. So, the next part I have today, or the next element I want to be talking about today, is the lack of development, and usually is stagnation. So, for me, development is changing. We talk about change a lot today, but development is changing to the better, and growth is being able to deal with more and to take on more as parts of your role. And hopefully, it means also other metrics such as financial growth, connections, growth and ability and experience and network, etc. Now, of course, in contrast, stagnation is staying. Um, Stagnation is staying in the same position, getting stuck, or being in a situation for a longer time, and not necessarily at the same workplace, but doing the same mistake over and over again. This is for me stagnation. So stagnation, it does have signs. Again, it's very common in the modern day where people are having difficult mental health, challenges or conditions, and it becomes a challenge to grow and seek development. So this is common, and it's also common because of the shortage in good people who talk to, who teach, who mentor, who guide engineers. So there is also a growing, or not growing, a decreasing funding for development because of course, the strong drivers for profitability and productivity, etc., etc. So these can sometimes squeeze the funds for development and the willingness and the time to be allowed to develop younger engineers and more in the workforce, which is a shame. Um, it does require the challenges that it does require a relatively more relaxed timeline to allow development and allow people to grow. However, again, modern day projects, modern day work constraints, they usually put a challenge on that. And why is it common? It's common because I feel that there is a lot of engineers who do not know how to develop. They don't have a plan and they lack the network and guidance. A lot of people send me saying, "Look, I'm lost. What do I do? Can you guide me?" etc. So this is very common. And again, it's excessive focus on profitability, productivity, repeatability. These are things that mean that there is less time, there is less effort, there is less opportunities and willingness to or made available for people to develop. And of course, there are less opportunities of knowledge transfer because the people ahead of us usually are very, very busy. They're just busy with their work, and rightly so. And this is a typical case of, oh, I don't have time to teach someone how to do something because if I had the time, I would just rather do it myself. So this is the problem. Now, outcomes of that problem is that you don't get the best results or outcomes as an engineer. When you don't develop, you miss out on better opportunities, of course. Eventually, you will get less options, and eventually, it can mean less job security. That's not a good thing. And you don't get that satisfaction of experiencing something new or the satisfaction and the euphoria of growing and learning more as a person and as an engineer. And I see people spending years and years repeating the same mistakes. So they're clearly unable to develop or progress. On the other hand, I see people who are thriving and they're like just duck to water when it comes to learning new things, and their attitude takes them further and further in their careers. So it's really unbelievable. Unfortunately, there are people who are falling behind every day due to stagnation, due to the lack of development, but just because they don't want to change or develop. And it's not like you need to change and develop by much. You just need to keep up enough, and all you need is I believe is very little development. So the benefits of that, of course, you become a more productive, a more efficient, a more effective engineer. Your profile elevates, and that reflects on you professionally and personally. Excuse me again. So you become more effective as an engineer, but it also reflects on your personal brand. It reflects on your reputation, and it opens up a lot more opportunities for you as an engineer. You thrive and you grow personally, financially, professionally. That's all, it's a better life effectively. So development is very important for us. You cannot afford to fall behind on development. You cannot afford to be career. That's not something you could just let happen. So what are the signs of uh, stagnation? Well, you'll find yourself repeating the same mistakes. You'll find yourself not progressing enough. You'll find yourself stuck in a loop that you're not necessarily enjoying. Um, and for me, getting out of that can be a challenge. Um, but it's important that you actually recognize it. And in order to recognize it, you need to be able to measure it. So again, back to having a plan, back to having objectives, back to having measurable targets. It would be useful to consult with somebody, perhaps your line manager or someone senior to you, or someone you look up to or trust as a mentor. And you could start to measure that development. And Of course, comparisons will come, but at the same time, um, no two careers are the same, and we can all have different roadmaps of careers and progress. It's not like there is only one size that fits all or one model that we all have to follow. On the contrary, it can be very, very different from a person to another. So, how to recognize that you have a problem with development? Well, one of the problems we can feel is defensiveness and not getting the feedback. Um, how do we respond to feedback? How do we respond to constructive messages that tell us where we need to act on or change or grow? And of course, how do you grow? Well, excuse me, I'm gonna have to sneeze again. My nose is just completely blocked. I'm sorry. So you expand your network, you meet others, you engage with others, you learn from others, you take bigger responsibilities, you push yourself at work a little bit more, you get into something relatively new, try different things, try new things. These are all things that can help you grow, help you develop. And of course, if it's not necessarily directly available to you at work, it's a shame, but there's lots of stuff that you could do outside of work. You try outside, you try different activities, you try learning new things, you try volunteering in organizations that you could be contributing towards developing others. And these are all things you really can learn everything if you want to. You don't need to be in a certain organization. You don't need to be in a certain environment. We can take responsibilities of our own development and take deliberate action to learn and grow. There's no doubt about that. Right. Are there any other questions before we move on to the last segment of the day? Let me know in the comments. Is anybody watching? Let me know in the comments. I'm probably not going to leave the recording on LinkedIn if I'm sneezing every few minutes. Right. The last blocker for me is lack of mentorship. And this is where you are really in the dark and you don't have someone you trust that you could consult with or check with or get ideas from or guidance from or learn from. And mentorship has many forms. We talked about mentorship before, we had a video about it, but very briefly, it's a development relationship. It really facilitates professional and personal growth. So, mentorship is a very, very important thing to look out for and to find and to secure in your different stages of your career, because for me, they've done really great things to my career, and it's taken me further than I've thought in shorter time as well. Because for me, it's about experience and knowledge, the direct transfer of. So mentorship is about the direct transfer of knowledge and skills. And experience. Mentorship is, or effective mentorship is about the direct transfer of experience and knowledge in a seamless way, in a way that helps you compare to your circumstance and to your situation, and then devise the best plan of action to take in order to grow yourself, to learn, to progress, etc. So there are many different types of mentorship, of course, but the first type, which is really, really helpful, is workplace based. This is where a senior engineer or a line manager could mentor you, and someone who's really not necessarily your superior, but it could be someone who's just a step or two ahead of you in their career. And that can be very, very helpful because that advice would be very circumstantial, so it could be very, it can be very, it will be very relevant to the organization you're in. It will be relevant to the current situation you're in as an engineer. So there's also anybody you could learn from. It doesn't have to be senior to you, and it can be a peer who has a skill or has a certain type of ability or experience that you don't necessarily have, and that's something you could want, or something you want to or could learn and improve on from them, of course. But the third type of mentorship is that a lot of people get external mentors. I talk to mentors outside of work. Nothing wrong with that. There's always somebody who's willing to help and willing to mentor, and there's no shortage of them these days with life online. So that is usually somebody who's not directly working in your organization or not directly working with you, and they could be somebody who's a source of good knowledge and experience. Now, why do people struggle with lack of mentorship? Well, first of all, there's knowledge gap. Really, a lot of people don't know what mentorship is and don't realize it. Maybe they're not aware of it, and most likely they don't know the opportunity exists, and of course its importance and the difference it makes. And these could be also resulting from self-awareness gaps, where people think highly or higher of themselves, when they don't realize that they've got areas that they need to improve on, and perhaps somebody who feels they do not need it. Fair play to them. But another problem with mentorship is access, and this is where people struggle to find the mentor. They might not be easily able to find or get connected to a mentor. And of course, in some professions, and I think in some family of jobs, there are fewer people willing to directly engage in mentoring. And there's a lot of people doing it, of course, not conscious of doing it or not being totally aware of actually doing it. But I would say there's only few people who are really aware that they need to mentor others and they need to get into professional mentoring engagements with others. Now, the problem with lack of mentorship is that you can get frustrated with what you do not know. And of course, we don't know what we don't know. Sometimes it can be very, very frustrating when you're missing that piece of information or knowledge or decision making that you need to follow, and you could be thinking of something and you're struggling to gather or grasp all its angles, and this is where a mentor can help you. And of course, the second problem can be stagnation, and again, you can stagnate because you can run out of ideas to try or to grow. And again, a good mentor would always have that extra idea that you haven't thought of or you haven't tried before, or that's something that could be very, very helpful for you to take on. And another thing is that when you're on your own, trying things out on your own for the first time, you risk making more mistakes. And that's okay. We can, learn from the mistakes, but excessive mistakes can delay you and not necessarily set you back. But of course, they can be at a certain price. So imagine life with a mentor. So having a mentor, I believe, is like having a sat nav, especially when you are on a trip that is uncharted, or you haven't, perhaps not uncharted, but the trip that you're making for the first time. Now, nowadays, if you're making a trip for the first time without a sat nav, it can be very, very challenging, especially an updated on the traffic conditions, on the road closures, roadblocks, etc., and changing conditions of the road. So that sat nav is like a mentor, and this is why it's a very important aspect, and it's a very blocker. It's a very effective blocker if not dealt with correctly. I'll tell you a story about myself. I got mentorship from a colleague who had great communication skills, and this is where I first came to the UK. I had, I think, decent English language skills, but I felt that I lacked the cultural context of being in the UK, of working in the UK, working in different parts of the UK, working in a different also industry, um, to what I'm used to and to where I'm from. So I did get a lot of help from somebody who mentored me in these kind of communication, and that was a combination of a direct and indirect mentorship because I've observed and I've asked questions around different, metaphors, sayings, ways of communicating things in the environment and in the new culture I'm in. So that is an example or a story of a successful mentorship which has helped me massively. So especially when you are moving countries or moving organizations or getting promoted, getting into new roles, mentorship can really make a difference. And when I got promoted to my first, management role, um, I was mentored by a couple of people, and again, they made a huge difference to how I approach things, how I set out to discover my way in what I do. And of course, today I mentor a lot of engineers, and I help them with a lot of things. So this is something that I learn from massively, even not just as a mentee, I still get mentored today, but as a mentor as well. It's something that really, really helps me understand a lot about today's generation of engineers and what is happening in the engineering society, in the engineering industry. So there's a lot of benefits in having mentors, and it saves you a lot of time on what you do not know. It really saves you a lot of time. It keeps you accountable as well. Uh, but it also gives you a kind of good feeling that someone is on your side. It's more enjoyable because it's more engaging. And if you have, imagine like having someone on your team, that's a very, very reassuring and supportive feeling to have, on top of all the benefits in terms of gaining the knowledge, transferring the experience, and opening doors as well. Some of the mentors will have connections and can open doors for you, can help you with your career. So there's a lot of that. So, how do you become a good mentee or someone who's really benefiting from mentorship? First of all, be specific. You need to understand and define and agree and communicate on what is it that you are getting out of the mentorship. So, be very specific when it comes to the goal. Be engaged, highly engaged, and interactive. So, don't just take it as a one-way street. Give feedback, try to get more clarity on the actions, ask questions, but more importantly, you have to act on the advice. And we always say about the advice, especially if it's online, that you got to take it into context. You got to make sure that the person giving you the advice is really coming from a place of relevance to your circumstance, to your professional background, to your career situations. So always do the work, follow up on the advice, follow up on the work, and follow up on the feedback. You have to take the action. That's very important. Now, how to find a good mentor and what does a good mentor look like? I think the good mentor will be somebody who's a good communicator to an extent, but also someone who comes from a relevant point of view to yours. So, by all means, you could try mentors outside of the industry, you could try different kinds of mentors, but if I'm getting mentored on engineering management, it's got to be somebody who's done the role. On the other hand, if I want to transition into a project management role and I'm looking for mentorship in during that transition, I'm going to probably look for someone who's had similar um, circumstances and professional background to myself and my situation, and ask them for mentorship on how to navigate that transition and what would be the best way to set out on that transition. You can find mentors, of course, in your organization, online, on LinkedIn, on some mentors' sites. There are specific professional sites out there. There's a lot of them. I think a simple Google search would help. But More importantly, there are organization, industry, and professional organizations out there that have or facilitate that mentorship opportunity for you as an engineer. So, thank you very much for your time. Those were the 5 areas that we covered today. We are going to call it a day now because, as you know by now, I've got a terrible cold and I'm struggling a little bit with my voice and my uh, nose or whatever, sneezing, whatever. So sorry about that. You can watch my other videos on each of these topics in detail. Please keep learning. Please stay curious. That's the best way to grow and develop. Um, Today, we went through 5 career blockers or obstacles and how to overcome them and how to deal with them. We went through the unhelpful emotions, how to acknowledge them, how to deal with them, how to identify them. We went through lack of adaptiveness and how to approach change in order to find more success and more opportunities. Change always drives more opportunities. We went through the lack of resilience and how we can be more patient. We also went through stagnation and the lack of development and how that limits our opportunities in our careers to grow. And we also went through the lack of mentorship. So thank you so much for giving me your time. I hope you've enjoyed this as much as I did. And I really like it when you ask me questions and send me suggestions and comments. And by all means, if you have a suggestion, if you have a topic that you want me to cover in my next live, then please let me know and send it over to me. I wish you all the best. Stay safe. And until then, please look after yourselves and enjoy your careers. Thank you very much and see you on Substack.